Like the Marmara Sea. So you mentioned thinking like a mountain. We will try to think like the Marmara Sea. Thank you so much for your invitation, Christoph, to be a lunchtime colloquium speaker. This is really very important for me because this gives me this wonderful opportunity to talk on the consequences of human impact on the Turkish Straits ecosystem. Everybody talks about the Turkish Straits strategic significance, but I'm thinking that its ecological significance is much more important. So I would also like to mention that only in Munich there are over 3,000 Turkish students in the universities, in the undergraduate and graduate programs. And I know that at the moment there are Turkish students here. Buse is here. I don't know who else is here. Nil is here. So I wish them luck and success in their works here. And I also know that there are a lot of students who are working on Turkish-German relations. So Turkish-German relations are really historically important, dates back to the Ottoman times, and also after Atatürk, these relationships strengthened, Turkish-German relations. And I know that many German engineers, architects, they contributed to Turkey's modernization in the 1920s and 1930s. So I wanted to mention this as well. Okay, so today I would like to talk on why environmental thinking is on the rise. And I will try to connect this to what is going on in the Sea of Marmara, our inland sea. An ecological catastrophe happened here a few years ago. In 2021, this is marine mucilage, also referred to as sea snot. It's this very thick, gelatinous organic matter that formed in the sea. But as marine biologists or ecologists say, what you see is just on the surface. What is going on under the water is much, much worse. So this outbreak, this mucilage outbreak, it really triggered environmental thinking enormously. But as I'm a literary scholar, I will look at this rise of environmental thinking from a literature perspective as well. And in this context, I would like to mention two environmental writers who wrote on the Marmara Sea. One is Yaşar Kemal. I'm sure you have heard Yaşar Kemal's name. He wrote some 24 novels. He has short stories, other non-fiction works. He passed away in 2015. So his sea literature is really important. He said a lot of things about the Marmara Sea, both in his fictional works and in his non-fiction works. I will also mention this Mustafa Sarı. At the moment, he is a professor at Bandırma University at the Faculty of Marine Sciences. Everybody knows Mustafa Sarı in Turkey. Earlier, he was affiliated with Van University in the eastern part of Turkey, and he worked there for many years, and he saved the pearl mullet from extinction. There was overfishing in Lake Van, and he worked really very hard to stop the fishermen to fish this endangered species, the pearl mullet. He has very funny stories actually relating to his work on the pearl mullet. In one of his talks, he said that he couldn't convince the fishermen not to fish, but he could convince their wives. So he was doing workshops with the wives of the fishermen, and then the wives did it. He's saying, to think. So now he's working on the Marmara Sea, and I'm thinking that he will save this very precious sea, because he's also a diver, he's writing, he's talking, he has a lot of YouTube videos, and I'm in touch with him quite often. Okay. By the way, on the pearl mullet, he wrote a book, Van Lake Pearl Mullet, and then the second edition was Vazgeçme, which means don't give up. Don't give up meaning, you have to work on, you have to go on working for the protection of the pearl mullet. That's what his idea was. Okay, so I said the Marmara Sea. Now, because of this, I think, catastrophe, we are, I think, at a point in which we will no longer regard our seas as a commodity. This is, I would like to mention Aldo Leopold's, for me, this is Aldo Leopold's most important sentence. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. So this is, I think, really important. But when I say commodity, I need to mention this beautiful story about Atatürk. This is the story. This is Yalova in the northern part of Turkey, this is Yalova, and Atatürk had some health problems, and he wanted a mansion to be built in this area in Yalova. And then after some years, when he visited this mansion, I think it was the gardener who said, there's this plane tree, and its branches are giving damage to the roof of this mansion. Can we cut the branches? He said, and Atatürk said, no, you can't cut the branches. You move the mansion instead, he said, and he was serious. These tram rails were brought from Istanbul, and he attended this entire construction work. They dug this hole underneath the mansion, and on the tram rails they moved the mansion, but they didn't cut the branches. So why did I mention this? Because for Atatürk, a tree is not a commodity. So I'm trying to say that, perhaps this is the example of not seeing the nature as a commodity. And I would also like to mention what's going on in the Turkish literary circles at the moment. There is really immense eco-critical activity going on. Turkish eco-critics, they are exploring the literary output of this centuries-long Central Asian ancestors of the present-day Turks, the Anatolian and Central Asian Turks' shamanistic past, the Orhon inscriptions, the myths of the Oghuz Turks, Anatolian Sufism, Anatolian people's literary heritage, past and present, the book of Dede Korkut, all these old texts are being explored at the moment, and there's really this enormous critical activity going on. And why is this important? This is important in that it's revealing this feelings of, compassion, especially empathy. And in this context, I would like to give another example. One Turkish literary critic made a comparison between Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and Yaşar Kemal's The Sea-Crossed Fisherman. Now, this is the comparison. Hemingway's character Santiago, hunts a swordfish. And then throughout the novel, he's trying to bring it to the shore so that everybody sees how big the swordfish that he caught was. So this is the Hemingway story. Yaşar Kemal's character in The Sea-Crossed Fisherman, Selim his name is, Selim hunts a swordfish because he has to sell it, because he's about to get married, he is going to buy a property, he needs it, he needs the money. But after he hunts the swordfish, he's so sorry and he lets it go. And he says, it has the right to roam the waters. I have no right to take its life away. And then after he lets it go, he starts worrying about the hook that it swallowed. So what is that? What is going to happen to that hook? For pages, he's worrying about the hook in the novel. And then eventually he says, well, nothing will happen. Kind of tissue will form around the hook, and then it will do nothing to the fish. And as for the line, well, it will find a way to get rid of it, you know. So he's fine. So he makes this comparison between Hemingway and Yaşar Kemal in terms of, you know, empathy. Okay, but literature is one thing, of course, and the reality is another story. This mucilage outbreak in the Marmara Sea in 2021, it was really an ecological disaster, and it's often referred to as the sea snot. Extensive damage to marine life. It disrupted local fisheries, and really it was unprecedented. Now, there are mucilage events going on around the world, but this was quite unprecedented because it really covered the entire sea. And maybe I should show. You know, all the coastal waters were like this, by the way. And I want to show the corals, you know, before the outbreak took place. Marmara Sea is especially rich with corals in the seabed. There's this very important novelist, Yaman Koray. He passed away many years ago. He wrote a novel on, again, the Turkish seas, and one of his novels is titled The Sea Fan. He's talking about the corals, and he's saying that, you know, once in a while these corals are carried out to the shores, and they are so glittering, you can read your book, your newspaper under it nighttime. So he's really very special, these sea fans, but this was the case after the mucilage. All this organic matter, it sank to the seabed, and it killed the corals. So, and I think this mucilage crisis, it highlighted the fragility of the Marmara Sea, and also this urgent need for, you know, comprehensive environmental management to combat the effects of this mucilage, and also pollution, of course. I mean, I mustn't just say, you know, this nutritious phosphate that is causing the mucilage, but also pollution, because this is the industrial area of Turkey, and there are like thousands of factories around Marmara, and some of them, they just discharge this water, untreated water. Maybe half of it is just discharged to the Marmara Sea. I mean, this was the case for many, many years. And also climate change. The Marmara Sea was 2.5 centigrades, I think, higher in that particular year, in 2021. It still is. You know, climate change is affecting our inland sea. So, what happened? It went. Yeah. So this is the mucilage. This is under the water. Has many components, microorganisms, including prokaryotes, debris, proteins, minerals. So it's a very interesting formation, this mucilage. But as Mustafa Sarı says, you know, what you see on the surface is nothing as compared to what is going on. It starts from the surface and goes down some 30 meters under the sea, this mucilage. It's thick. It's a jelly-like substance. And yeah, so I would like to show this land pyramid, Ala Leopold's land pyramid. And I want to say that with this catastrophe, finally, we started seeing ourselves in Ala Leopold's, you know, this layer with the rodents. Ala Leopold created this land pyramid, and he said that human beings occupy this layer with the rodents. And he made this, you know, relationship between commodity and empathy. You know, if we understand our place in the land pyramid, then we no longer regard the nature as a commodity, and then there's hope to empathize with it. This is Leopold, by the way. And then I want to say that this land pyramid is in fact a sea pyramid. I have a publication on this some 10 years ago, how the land ethic can be viewed as the sea pyramid, because it's the same thing. The layer on the top, that's for the marine predators like dolphins, like sharks. So in Leopold's, it's the wolf and other carnivores. But in the sea ethic, it's the shark, the dolphin, the orkinos, the tuna, you know. And Yaşar Kemal is in this sea pyramid perspective important, because he is saying so many interesting things related to the disappearance of the top predators in the Marmara Sea. That, you know, first these top predators, the dolphins, the swordfish, they were removed with overfishing, and then the ecosystem got collapsed, and that's why we're having all these problems. This is Yaşar Kemal, by the way. And in this context, I'm going to refer to a telephone conversation I had with Yaşar Kemal, because, you know, in one of his novels, he's saying something like the Marmara should be announced as a marine reserve, that all the fishermen, and there are thousands of them, thousands of fishermen make a living around Marmara. He proposed that all these fishermen, they take out their fishing equipments and then put them all to this statue, which is in Taksim in Istanbul. So this is what he's saying, that they should make a silent walk, go there and leave it there and never touch their fishing equipment for 10 years until the Marmara ecosystem recovers. This is what he says in one of his in one of his texts. Okay, now this Turkish Straits system. When people think of Turkey, it's this inland sea and it's this country covered with the Black Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. And there was really, the ecosystem was functioning quite healthy in the past. Now, what happened? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This world population rise, it's going to be some 10 billion in 2060, but I'm thinking that that is really not important. The important thing is 10 billion people in 2060 who claim the world is my commodity. The species are my commodity. Otherwise, pollution, otherwise population rise wouldn't be a problem. It's this problem that Leopold mentions in Ascent County Almanac, that we have this habit of seeing the world as our commodity. So, Yaşar Kemal published this novel, The Sea-Crossed Fisherman, in the 1970s. And this is how it happened. He talks about this Cumhuriyet newspaper. The manager gives him a telephone call one day. This is early 1950s. Over the telephone, he told me he can't quite remember. This was either 1952 or 1953, he said. Somebody gave him a telephone call from this Cumhuriyet newspaper, and he said, in Haydarpaşa port, there are 2 Italian boats, and they are paying a lot of money for dolphin oil. And then he wanted to see this. So he had a lot of fishermen friends. He called one of them and he got in his boat and they went to this place where these dolphins were being killed, hunted. So this is early 1950s. What he saw was so tragic. This is what he said over the telephone to me. What he said was so tragic, he couldn't turn this into a novel for 10 years. Then he decided to write The Sea-Crossed Fisherman about this incident. And that he did when he was in Sweden, 10 years later. And he published this in the 1970s, The Sea-Crossed Fisherman. And this is the book where he's talking about the presence of tens of thousands of dolphins in the Marmara Sea. And that's the reason why I gave him a call. I said, is this fiction? Is this your imagination? Or is this true? And he said, no, this is true. There were tens of thousands of dolphins in the Marmara Sea. But then there was this government-sponsored, but it wasn't just in Turkey, it was around the world. I would like to show this map. Also, you must have watched this film, The Cove, about dolphin hunting. In Turkey, it was banned in 1983, but it is still going on in all these coastal waters around the world. So, but in Turkey in the 1950s, it was particularly intense, because dolphin oil was used in the industries, and there was very big demand for dolphin oil. It was used in the steam engines, because it's a liquid that stays in, it's a kind of oil that stays in liquid form. So it's important for the industries. So there was this demand for dolphin oil in the 1950s. But I mean, it created this, ecosystem collapse. Now, this is a very significant location, by the way, Istanbul Strait. It's really a very unique place, I think, in the world. Some 50,000 years ago, Black Sea was a freshwater lake. The Bosphorus and Dardanelles, they didn't exist. Marmara was another lake. And then some major landslides occurred in the Marmara and Aegean regions. And then this Istanbul and Çanakkale Straits came into being as a result of these landslides. Then the waters of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, they began to meet through two different currents, the surface current and the counter current below the surface. And today, this flow of water in opposite directions between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, of course, it's still going on from the, from the salinity difference. There's the salinity difference that's also creating this, because the Black Sea is less salty as compared to Aegean and the Marmara Seas. So many marine biologists, they're doing work on the Marmara Sea, how important it is for the study of these cetaceans and all. Bayram Öztürk, for example, a professor of marine science, he says, a massive ocean passes through the city of Istanbul. An ocean passes. I say ocean because the salty waters found 40 meters below the surface of the Istanbul Strait, and the Marmara Sea is from the Atlantic Ocean, which journeys and then reaches the Istanbul Strait. Surface waters of the Istanbul Strait are much less salty. It comes from the Black Sea and ends up in the Mediterranean. Every second, the waters from the Atlantic and the Black Sea flow through the city and salute the townsmen. These are scientists, but they're writing in a very lyrical way. I love his Sea Essays book, for example. Another marine scientist, Cemal Saydam, he's emeritus professor, by the way. He wrote this Havadan Tozdan. We did a publication together with Cemal Saydam. He's interested in desert dust, the desert dust transfers from the Sahara, Toki, Taklamakan, Gobi, Gobi, Taklamakan, and Sahara deserts. He's interested in these dust transfers. That's why it's from the air, from the dust. That's the name of the book. He says Marmara is a magnificent sea for the ones who know its structure. The first 20 meters or so from the Black Sea, and below that, 1,200 meters at its deepest is from the Mediterranean. Like olive oil and water, these waters do not mix. Fish fauna in the Marmara is limited to the top 25 meters. And he's also explaining how the top 25 meters, the water in the top 25 meters is renewed every 3 months. But because the subsurface waters are from the Mediterranean, its renewal happens every 7 years. So this also created fish migrations. This very unique condition of the strait, Istanbul Strait, led to fish migrations. So this is this rich fish fauna in these waters. What does the green color indicate? What does the blue color indicate? The blue color indicates there's no fish. The green color indicates there's a lot of fish. So green areas are where fish is particularly rich. And if you notice, the Black Sea, the Aegean, the Marmara, very rich in terms of fish fauna. This unique ecosystem, it created two different types of fish in the Turkish Strait system, permanent species and migratory species. And the fish in the Turkish waters developed a habit to migrate twice a year between these waters. As the waters of the Black Sea get cold in the fall, many fish species start migrating to the Marmara as far as the Mediterranean, and the return back to the Black Sea takes place in the spring when Black Sea gets warmer. So, I would like to say that this unique condition, it really made the Turkish Straits a paradise for small-scale fishermen for thousands of years in this area. This north-south migration of fish from the cold waters of the Black Sea to the warm Marmara in the fall and the return trip in the spring, this really gave fishermen plentiful harvest, and you would come across, for example, expressions like women catch fish by dangling baskets out of their windows along the Bosphorus. It was so rich in the past. And this is the topic for the books of many natural scientists like Pierre Gilles. This French natural scientist is talking about this rich fish fauna in the Bosphorus. Another would be our Evliya Çelebi in his book of travels, and book 1 is on Istanbul, by the way, Evliya Çelebi's book 1. It's a 10-volume, by the way, work, and in this first volume he's talking about all these weirs in Istanbul. He says 300, and the largest one is located at the Beykoz port. Very detailed accounts of these weirs in the Istanbul Strait in the 17th century. Pierre Chihachev, a Russian natural scientist, again, he gives very detailed descriptions of this fish fauna in the Turkish Strait system, not just Istanbul Strait, also the Dardanelles. This is like 100 years ago, small-scale fishermen, and this is from Karekin Deveciyan's book. Karekin Deveciyan, by the way, he was, let me read from my notes. He was a Turkish Armenian zoologist, and he was the director of the fishery of Istanbul, by the way. And he wrote this book. He wrote it first in French, and then it was translated into Ottoman Turkish, and then much later to Turkish. Türkiye'de Balık ve Balıkçılık was published. And he did this publication because he wanted to say that this area, this very unique area in the world, it must be protected because this is an excellent location for world food security, because there's so much fish here and it must be protected, he was saying. And yeah, and this is Karekin Deveciyan talking about how these migratory fish move in the Istanbul Strait and also in the Dardanelles. They wait for their turn. It's very interesting how they migrate. One species passes and then waits, and then the other one passes and then waits. These fish species, they're coming one after the other. They're waiting for their turn to migrate, and Karekin Deveciyan is talking about this. Yeah, and a very special location is the Gulf of Izmit. It was a breeding farm of the Marmara Sea. Even tuna fish arrived from the Atlantic Ocean to breed. And that is the area where like half of Turkey's industry is. And I mean, of course, that created pollution, obviously. And now, populations of many species are in decline. Before the mucilage, this decline in fish species occurred before the mucilage. And Yaşar Kemal, the seas dried up. In one of his texts, he says, now every fisherman you meet is upset. They dried up the seas. There were so many fish that if you dropped the needle, it wouldn't hit the bottom. Istanbul used to have massive fish raids, mackerel, bluefish, bonito, toric raids. Anyone who swung the rod or threw the net pulled back a reward. Rowboats, fishing boats, motorboats would pile mountains of fish under bridges, fish markets, sidewalks. The city would get drunk and frenzied over the amount of fish, he says. And the dolphin issue. For him, it's especially the decline in the numbers of the dolphins. I mean, if we remember the sea pyramid, Leopold's sea pyramid, Leopold came up with the land pyramid, but the sea pyramid, I think it's identical in terms of the top predators like sharks, dolphins, and orkinos, tuna fish, and the other swordfish and the other big fish. In the absence of dolphins, you never come across swordfish. I caught 9 red mullets this year. Can you imagine? Just 9. So that dolphin hunt in the 1950s, which actually went on until 1983, perhaps on a smaller intensity or lower intensity perhaps, that according to Yaşar Kemal was really bad for the ecosystem stability here in this area. All the different species of fish in the Black Sea pour into the Marmara to reproduce. They take refuge in the Marmara. Once you destroy the stability in the Marmara, the stability in the Black Sea and also the Aegean Sea will be devastated. The world is like our bodies. Once you destroy one part of the seas, the rest of the seas will be affected. Once you destroy a part of the land, the rest of the lands will be destroyed, he pointed out in one of his non-fiction texts, The Seas Dried Up. Okay, so I think I'm coming to the end of my talk. When this mucilage outbreak happened in the Marmara, of course, the entire country was panicky. Everybody, even school kids, Marmara, everybody was talking about the Marmara. Mustafa Sarı, he wrote this book, Mucilage. Ağıt mı, umut mu? Ağıt means mourning. Shall we mourn or shall we be hopeful? That's the subtitle. Hopeful in that this catastrophe finally brought us to our senses. That's the idea in the book. So Kim Stanley Robinson's The Ministry for the Future, that novel starts with a tragedy, as you know, a catastrophe. Some 20 million people die in India. And then the Ministry for the Future is established. But that's fiction. This is real. A catastrophe came into being, and then everybody is talking about how to protect our precious Marmara Sea. So many, of course, measures were introduced. Immediately, the Marmara was announced as a marine protected area. And then, what else? Marmara Sea Action Plan was announced, a 22-article action plan. And 14 of these articles are about to prevent the pollution from the industries, of course. The industries who are not treating their wastewater, they were closed down or fines, you know, they were given fines. So, especially this action 3 is important, I think. Efforts to designate the entire Sea of Marmara as a protected area will be initiated and completed by the end of 2021, and that happened. It was announced as a marine protected area. And this all happened so fast. This is really unprecedented in the country's history. Everybody talking about this catastrophe and everybody's working on this. There were like workshops and thousands of people were attending the workshops. Yeah, what are we going to do? How are we going to get rid of it? How are we going to clean, you know? So this is, by the way, this part, these islands, marine protected. These are marine, and around these islands you cannot fish there, you know. And also here, Istanbul's Princess Islands, they are also under protection. You cannot do fishing. Plus, the entire sea is a marine protected area. Very controlled fishing activities are or will be allowed, I'm thinking. This is, I think, all I have. Yaşar Kemal and I, we had another telephone call, and I would like to, you know, share this with you. I think this is important. In one of our conversations, he had a request from me. He said he heard that the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean started healing itself. Is this true? He said. Can you learn? It started, you know, recovering after the atom tests in this Bikini Atoll. And at that time, I was writing an article on Terry Tempest Williams Refuge, and I was in touch with Richard Miller, the author of Under the Cloud. And in that book, Richard Miller is talking about all these atmospheric atomic tests in the Nevada test site and how it was affecting the entire continent, even how it was affecting the entire world, because these radioactive clouds were circling around the world. So I called him and I said, our renowned writer, Yaşar Kemal, he has a request. He wants to know if this Bikini Atoll, it's, you know, healing itself. And he said, I don't know, let me check, he said. I will get back to you in a few days, he said. And he called back a few days later and he said, your author is right. It is recovering. And I told this to Yaşar Kemal. And then he published his last novel, Çıplak Ada Çıplak Deniz, the last novel. And that novel is about this, you know, how a devastated ecosystem, once you don't interfere, once you stop interfering, no human impact, it starts slowly recovering by itself. So that's what he did in his last novel. So I have a question to you all. Okay, Marmara, it was announced as a marine protected area, but it's not a marine reserve model. Marine reserve is not interfering with the entire sea. It's like a wilderness area in the land. You cannot open up roads. You can't do anything. And Yaşar Kemal proposed something like this. For 10 years, all fishing activities should be stopped. He mentioned that in one of his works. So I found this map, all these marine reserves around the world, but as you can see, non-existent in the Black Sea, none in the Aegean, none in the Mediterranean. Yes, Yeah, some in the Mediterranean, sorry. Some marine reserves along the coasts of, I think, Italy and some other, Spain. And my question is, what can be done to announce the Marmara Sea as a marine reserve? Because when I talk about this with Mustafa Sarı and other marine scientists, they're telling me that it would be very difficult. Very difficult, they're saying. Well, yeah, difficult, I agree, very difficult, because 55,000 ships pass along the Istanbul Strait and Dardanelles. And 5 of them carry hazardous cargo, toxic. So yeah, 55,000 ships each year, and 5 of them carry this toxic, things, like cargo. Plus all these industries, and the marine scientists are saying that it would be very difficult to announce it as a marine reserve. And I'm telling myself, why? Why difficult? So maybe we can, that's the end of my talk, maybe we can talk about this now all together. What can be done, I mean.
Thank you.